So if we pivot to inside organizations, it becomes equally important and tends to go across generations now, right? Young people are coming in, the leaders tend to be older, this is the way we've always led, do your hard work, and then you get to move up the leadership ladder. And the young people coming in are like, I don't need that. And leaders are really upset about that. But how do we meet them?
Welcome to Unpack, Culture Chronicles. I'm Danielle Marshall, an equity strategist and executive coach. This podcast explores the intersection of curiosity, culture, and connection with practical strategies to help us bridge divides and build stronger relationships. In today's episode, I'm thrilled to welcome my friend, Wendy Moomaw, founder of the Conscious Collaboratory, a dynamic space dedicated to helping leaders navigate change with humility, curiosity, and courage. Wendy's deep expertise in systems thinking and relational knowledge invites us to rethink how we approach challenging conversations and connect across differences. Together, we'll explore how curiosity creates openings for wonder, compassion, and meaningful dialogue in both personal and professional spaces. So welcome to the show, Wendy. I'm thrilled to have you on as a guest today. Wendy and I have been good friends and collaborators on reimagining racial equity, and I really couldn't wait to sit down for this conversation. I enjoy you immensely, and I know that our listeners are going to enjoy you as well. And so, Wendy, I'm wondering if you would just kick us off maybe with an introduction of yourself.
It's so good to see you again. And I might be time pointing this, but happy new Gregorian calendar year.
Happy New Year to you as well.
It's the first time I've seen you in 2025.
Absolutely.
I'm very excited for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having me here. I can introduce myself in lots of different ways, and I suppose this is the first introduction of 2025, since we're changing all the time. So I'm the founder of the Conscious Collaboratory, and we're really designed to be agile and skillful as we navigate an ever-changing world. You and I have worked in racial equity together, co-creating reimagining racial equity, and we know that there's broad tensions across many different and diverse areas. And I'm kind of in this place of what does it mean to be well? So the Conscious Collaboratory is really designed to help leaders stay rooted in themselves so others can lean into their stability during this time. And I'm thinking about a mindset of humility and curiosity, a heart practice of relational knowledge and experience, and an embodied presence and courageous wisdom. And wrapping those all together so the most prepared leaders can tap into these contexts and resources all at the same time.
Yeah, thanks for that, Wendy. And I love that you are, even in this new year, centering curiosity. I know we've had a ton of conversations about like what it means to be curious, and you know that this season we're really leaning into curiosity here. And one of the things that I personally know about you, and we've had several conversations about, is that you're someone who can take in a lot of different data pieces and you start to analyze it and start to do more systems work. And I'm wondering for you, just to like sort of kick us off and thinking about the work that you do professionally, I'm wondering if you could answer this question of like, how does curiosity help you to make more sense of the data that's in front of you?
What I find when I work with leaders is often when you're having conversations, it looks like the other person. Okay, sometimes it can happen in family systems. My father did this. My mother did this. Sometimes it looks like in organizations. This employee did this. This leader did that. And it gets associated with an individual. Sometimes in organizations I hear, especially you hear the loudest voices, this person is always the one who says this. They always are complaining to me about that. And we start to associate it with the person, and it impacts our relationship with the person. But if I get really, really curious and I think about it in a systems perspective, I can look at it and say, that person is saying something that is alive in the system. It's a data point. And then I can separate my curiosity about the data, about their particular statement, instead of focusing on the person. So, for example, in an organization, an employee might say, leadership needs to step up and speak out about an issue, a cultural issue. They need to stand up and speak out and protect the community because we are a nonprofit and we're serving underprivileged communities. Leadership needs to speak up and speak out. But what you'll hear in a coaching conversation is this person is always saying these things, and they get really irritated at that one person.
Yeah.
And it's not really about that person. It's just that voice is offering data about what's happening in the larger system.
Yeah, I'm appreciating that, both for the opportunity to lean more into curiosity, but also that word for me, always, is generally a moment to pause, because I'm like, always? Is that in fact a truth in this moment, or is it occasionally happening, but you're hyper focused on this particular behavior?
Well, and you and I know from when you start to, we know from the ladder of inference, right? We know that when we start to get data and somebody gets a little bit under our skin, can be anybody, right? The person in the grocery store. Everything that they do that shifts our story, we actually ignore. We only pay attention to the one that kind of keeps amplifying the story we hold about this person.
Yeah, that feels so very true for where we're at as a society right now. Whether it is, you're watching the news, you're listening to political folks talk, we are definitely leaning more and more into sort of the data that supports the language that support our particular position, rather than being as curious as we could be to say, what else is there? What else might be true in this moment? And I'm wondering, even like as you think about that, like what are the ways that we can start to help people lean more into that curiosity instead of just having this very narrow conversation and focus that they're thinking about?
Sometimes I think about an MRI. Have you ever had an MRI?
I have not, thankfully, not yet.
All right. Well, an MRI is like an egg slicer. Have you ever used an egg slicer?
I have.
The one that has all those wires, and you push it down and you see all the little segments of the egg. Well, the egg looks the same, right? It's got a little white around the yolk. And so you're very clear about it. But when you do it in an MRI, you're really getting the same kind of vertical slices of a knee, for example. I have a knee injury. I need to see where the knee injury is before you go in and have surgery, or see if you even need surgery. And so I take these individual slices, microscopic slices, put it in front of a medical professional so they can determine what mechanically can be done to ease your pain. When we see people in the world and we have a moment with them, we are just getting a micro slice of their life.
Yeah.
And so I can be curious. I can lean into curiosity by understanding there's something happening in this micro slice, but that is not the person I'm meeting. I'm meeting them in a moment of time, and I'm really just getting a piece.
Yeah.
And you can't see the big picture unless I am in the practice of zooming out to say, oh, you're really irritated right now, and you are really irritating me, but this is not all of you.
I love that as a visual, because I think that is very tangible for people, right? Like you can imagine the slices, and when we think about us as people, while I don't necessarily think about us as eggs all the time, I do think about people very often as onions, right? And it's like peeling away the layers. What else is underneath there? What we see presented is only, to your point, like a slither of this person, when there's so much more personality, character traits, past history, trauma, like all of these things are under the surface, and they can manifest in that moment, but we can only see that one interaction.
So I'll share a story.
Please.
There was I went to a sandwich shop, and I walked in, and I was waiting for my food, and an older man came and he sat next to me, and he was maybe 78 years old, 80 years old. And I just had this, I was just like, hi, how are you? I'm just waiting for my sandwich. He goes, boy, I've had a really rough day. He goes, my wife isn't doing very well. I've been caring for her all night. It's been a tough couple of days, and I'm just in here to get a meal. And I go, oh, I'm really sorry to hear that, And so we had a little bit of conversation around that. He got his food, and I paid for his meal. I said, here, let me help you. Let me just get your sandwich. He goes, no, you don't have to. I go, you know what? You've had a hard day. It's okay. A hard couple of days. Let me help you out. So I bought his sandwich, and he left. And I stood there waiting, and the bartender approached me, and she goes, do you know who that was? And I go, no, he was just a man struggling with his wife. She goes, he owns like this whole little town.
Mm,
And I wasn't, that didn't matter to me. I didn't know that. It would have affected how I did it. But instead, I just met him with curiosity. And he was, to me, because I was an out of towner, he was just a man walking in who had had a hard night.
yeah. I am. I'm appreciating that because you started off telling us a little bit about curiosity sort of in a professional capacity, but it also extends into our personal lives if we allow it to. And I'm wondering for you, like as you think about that, because what a beautiful story, but like what does it mean for you to lead with a value of curiosity?
You know what I love about curiosity most is its adjacency to wonder
Mm,
and its adjacency to awe. Like when I get curious, it's almost like being a kid at the beach, walking on the surf, looking around at what is it that I might discover that I've never seen before, that's been brought to my feet, that I can touch, look at, walk around it. And how do I do that in conversation? When there's something I've never seen before, when I want to get curious about it, the first thing I do is I don't poke it. I might go in very slowly and touch it slightly. And how do I do that with words and in conversation? So I think that there's like we have particular patterns of the ways we are curious, but actually curiosity surrounds us. Take off your socks, put your feet on the ground. What are you curious about? What are you noticing with the sensations through your skin? And how do we invite that level of curiosity when we're in conversation with people?
yeah, I love that. And I'm thinking back to something that you had said to me earlier when you were talking about curiosity, you were talking about life overall, and you said that you view life as a form of verbal play. And I'm wondering like how that influences the way that you happen to like engage in conversation, especially with people from different identities. And so, again, so we can talk about this personally, professionally, but like when we interact with folks who are different from us, what does that mean for you as you get to play in that space?
I love this question. And we can be curious about a lot of different things, but the most interesting ways to be curious for me is to be curious about the people who are really, really close to us.
Okay.
So I'm the parent of 3 young adults. And my older patterns were to really raise them the way I was raised. This is what I expect of you. This is what your job is supposed to be. This is the order, quote unquote, that you are supposed to live your life. And the world is very different than when I was raised.
Yeah.
And so I practice curiosity with those I love most. Because even though I see them often and I've known them forever, I don't really know their experiences from day to day. I don't really know how their outlooks are changing because of what they're getting influenced by.
Yeah.
I don't see them with their friends all the time. So I practice curiosity with them. And I'll give you a different story. When I took my kid out to a Five Guys one time, we were in a very challenging place in our relationship. And we went out and we sat on 2 different sides of the table. And as we were waiting for our food, I asked him, what do you see? What are you noticing right now? And he said, outside, there's a person with a grocery cart right outside the store. And I'm kind of wondering if they're homeless or if they're in the house. Or what are they doing nearby here where there's not really a grocery store around? And you know what? I had no idea that person was outside. I didn't notice it at all. So we see the world and experience the world differently. So how do I just ask, like, what are you noticing? What is happening around you? Yeah. We're sitting together and I'm asking what is happening around you because what you see is different from what I see.
I am particularly appreciating that that question and even the statement that we see the world differently, because I was engaged in my own conversation the other day with someone where that was something that I said and they took great offense to it. Now, from my perspective, it's a neutral statement. We do see the world differently. All of us happen to see the world differently. But the difference is, like, are we able to lean into the curiosity to be able to say, like, tell me what's important to you? What are you noticing in this moment? What does that mean to you? Right? How do you define this word? I think there's so many ways that we can continue to understand each other better. Like if we dive into, not to batter people with questions, but to really be able to hopefully get to know one another. And I'm loving that you started with like your own kids, because oftentimes, and I think even when I think about this podcast, like we're talking about how we make connections with others and maybe others that have different social identities than we do. But you're right. The practice can even start at home.
And I think it's really important. You know, you and I have done a lot of work around in the practice in different groups. And I think part of the challenge is always, how do I get curious, but how do I not offend? How do I get curious without putting other people on the defensive?
Yeah.
How do I practice my own curiosity? And I find it's easiest to practice with people who give you a wide berth for making mistakes.
Absolutely. Because we will make mistakes.
All the time. I make mistakes all the time. And when you're in the practice of doing it and people develop healthy boundaries, they might say, hey, I don't really want to talk about that. Okay, this is great. But if you don't have those, or you're not in the practice of it, it can come in and be responded to differently.
Yeah.
You're asking too much.
It sort of begs this bigger question for me as I'm listening to you of like, how do you want to respond to the mistakes that you make? Right. I think sometimes people fail to move forward with either conversations, getting to know people, or even asking these questions that we're talking about because they're fearful that if they say the wrong thing, if they offend someone, like the world is going to end. And the reality is, and getting back to your point, like we're going to make mistakes. That is very human nature of us. But now I sort of want to add on this question of like, when we make the mistake, what's my go-to response? How do I handle it? How do I make sure I can continue to show up in the future and still be curious? Because I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's part of the work we do is around relational knowledge, right? In the conscious collaboratory, and understanding how to pace yourself in conversations and with whom, right? So I might be in a practice of curiosity with my children, with my young people, young adults, with my people. And I might not be in a practice of curiosity where I've been in very challenging relationships. And the reason for that is because it's requiring a different pace. So if I think about the world is accelerating, everything is happening all at once. All the data is coming in. You know, we have worldwide tragedies happening. We have local tragedies happening. How do I navigate this space? I sometimes have to really slow down because there's too much happening. Yeah. And my brain can't process it all. And when I'm in conversation with people that I may have had harm done to me or harm done to them, or our situations are very difficult because we're managing things in our worlds that are very complicated, taking care of an aging parent, taking care of a child that's struggling. Those conversations have to be really, really slow. And so there's a difference between being curious, being supportive, being curious to learn, for me as a practice of empathy, how can I understand where people are standing and what are they experiencing? And also, how do I approach thoughtfully and with intention? Because when we create harm, it's no longer curiosity; it's extractive.
It absolutely can be. I completely agree with you there. But your point brings up another question for me. So allow me to be curious in this moment. You said that this is about slowing down when you have these moments. What does it mean to slow down, right? And I asked that very intentionally here because I think we often hear words and we assume we know what the other person's talking about. but how we define it may look different from person to person. So for you personally, what does slowing down mean?
In relationship with another, in conversations with another, slowing down for me means we take a pause when we feel we can't have the conversation anymore, and we promise to return. And we say, when we come in to return again, we say, hey, I wondered if we could pick up our conversation before. Is now the right time to do that? Which is, again, a level of engagement and attunement to the other person. Like, I have things to say. I let it build up. I have written things down, perhaps. And now I'm ready. But are you ready? Because that is part of being readying together. And you may say, I've had a really hard day. I've got 14 texts from my kid from school. I cannot.
Yeah. I think that really resonates with me. There have been many occasions in my life where I tend to take a similar approach where I will back away before things maybe escalate in a moment so that I can sort of regain my composure. The other person has some space for themselves. But being able to engage again in that conversation means we're not just sweeping it under the carpet. We're not walking away from it entirely. And so I feel like there's a great importance there. But I think the other thing that I'm really hearing loud and clear is it's this piece around permission and understanding that just because you desire to have a conversation or you desire to have a question answered does not mean you get to tell someone and dictate when it happens. And so to really be engaged in a thoughtful conversation, it's a give and take, quite frankly, both of time, space, and knowledge in that moment.
Really appreciate that perspective. And it's one of the greatest gifts of practice that I have with my children, because my children aren't children anymore, they're people. And as a parent, listen, there's a little hierarchical structure. I'm the parent, you're the child. I provide resources, you get your resources, and now they're young adults. And this is not any more about that. It's about repatterning our habits and changing from this, I get to say what I get to say when I get to say it, to I have something to say. Are you ready to have that conversation?
Yeah.
It's like retooling how I parent.
Absolutely. And I see that even with the younger generations. Like, a lot of people are talking about gentle parenting right now. And there are supporters and there are critics of gentle parenting, but nonetheless, it is here. But this idea of viewing our young people as exactly that, people, even though they may be 8 or 9 years old, that they still have their own desires, needs. They may need space. Like, I see that even with my own daughter. I may want to have a deep conversation and she's like, man, school was terrible today. I just need to go in my room for a few minutes. And being able to respect that enough to allow that space so that when we come back, we can have a much more meaningful conversation. And I'm seeing the same thing like in my work professionally. This episode is sponsored by Culture Principles, your partner in building inclusive cultures where everyone thrives. Through executive coaching and tailored organizational strategies, we're here to help you foster connection and equity at every level. Ready to take the next step? Visit us at culture-principles.com. I kind of want to pivot our conversation a little bit back to sort of the professional work that you do, that I do, because I'm wondering what it means to be curious in those moments when the tough conversations come up. Like, we're talking about race, we're talking about sexual orientation, we're talking about policies in organizations, like all of these things that can be really contentious. Like, what does it mean for you to be able to stay true to yourself in those moments, but also remain curious about someone else's identity, their thoughts and beliefs as you're navigating in this space where there may be polarization?
That's the hardest work ever. And especially, and I'm just going to name this, there's a lot of families really feeling a lot of tension inside of them because of differences, stark differences in what they believe is the future for our country, for their families, for their people. And it's really sensitive when it is inside family. So if we pivot to inside organizations, it becomes equally important and tends to go across generations now, right? young people are coming in, the leaders tend to be older, leaders are moving to a different, this is the way we've always led, do your hard work, and then you get to move up the leadership ladder. And the young people coming in are like, I don't need that.
Yeah.
And leaders are really upset about that. But how do we meet them? How do we practice this use of relational knowledge to understand what it is that young people are looking for inside organizations? And how do I not make it about this person is a young person? Remembering an MRI, I'm coming in and I'm seeing a slice of a person. And then if I ascribe my perspective on that person, I make it about that person. And then if I have that amongst a couple of young people, then I ascribe it to a generation. This generation, blah, blah, blah. And I'm a little like, that's actually not the point.
Yeah.
The point is something is happening. And as a leader, I need to be aware that something is happening. And it's happening to a particular age group of people. And how do I want to meet that moment? So I can get very specific and say, abide by the ways we've always done things. And they sit there and go like, yeah, but look at the world y'all have created.
Yeah.
I'm out.
Yeah.
We have to do it differently.
Yeah. I think that also speaks really well to this idea that we're not a monolith. Like none of us are monoliths within our social identities. So as you're talking about young people in this case, they are, and this is a very interesting year because with January 1st just rolling over, this is the introduction of a new generation. So it's Generation Beta effective January 1 of 2025. And so it's like we keep ascribing meaning to all of these generations, but I'm like, do they all move that way? There may be some similarities, some patterns that start to emerge, but I'm like, are they all the same? Are we all the same? And so I'm wondering, like, as you do your work, how you can resist the urge, both for yourself, but definitely for the clients and the people that you're working with, to like have them just want to group folks and be like, oh, this is just Gen Z. That's how they process. This is millennials. This is, fill in your favorite social identity. But like, we want to pull people away from this idea that everybody of this group or identity functions the same way. So what are your go-to strategies around that?
Get curious about yourself. More often than not, every time I ascribe a particular structure to something, it's because of something that I don't feel comfortable with about difference.
Ooh, say more about that. That's juicy.
If I make it about young people, it's really the fact that I feel I am uncomfortable and perhaps a little rigid about what I think young people should have, young people should do. And I'm using my fingers in quotes, which I know on a podcast is a little strange. So I'm just naming that. Young people should be like this. Young people should want that. Young people should do this. Young people should protect their future like that. And I'm like, I don't think it's about the young people at all. But I think this actually might be about something else that's happening inside of the leader. And if we think it's always about other, that you'll lose the chance to shift anything.
Yeah. So introspection sounds like it's a really big piece of this work also in this moment. It's to be able to turn the lens back on oneself and just say, what else is emerging here? And I've heard you talk about this before, but I'm curious, like how your interactions with others help you discover maybe new pieces of either your identity or your thinking.
I often find it's easier to watch in other people what's alive in me. So, sometimes you might have an argument with your kid and you're like, oh, that behavior, that didn't come from me. But that's not true. It did come from me. There's a flavor of me. And so I watch in my 3 young adults, like how it's shaping me. Now, this isn't true for them, but also they can look at people in their family system and say, oh, that quality, that argument that I'm having with my parent is also alive in me. Right? And so it's not something special because I'm a parent that I have this opportunity. We can do this with every person we interact with. They behave in a certain way. It irritates me because it reminds me of how someone treated me in my past. Yeah. And it's not about them. It's actually the fact that I get irritated. Yep. So this, again, brings the lens back to me. So when I'm thinking about polarization, we think about, us versus them. It's always about the other. When in reality, it's like, I can't change anybody else. That's a fact. Mm-hmm. Everyone I meet, I cannot change. Also true. But I can change myself. And when I change myself, I can meet the same exact people over and over again and engage in newer and newer conversations, because that's neuroplasticity of the brain. It's constantly changing. I can keep learning. It's not true that you can't teach an old dog new tricks.
Yeah, absolutely. And, what you're touching on, I think also goes back to like our youth, our young adulthood and so forth throughout our life. And we have different experiences. And so I'm wondering for you, like, how do you cultivate curiosity in moments where the response you're having, physical, mental, might be rooted in trauma or discomfort for you?
So I'm curious for you. Mm-hmm. How does it feel like to ask that question?
It's somewhat uncomfortable to even ask the question, because I understand in asking it, ask another person, you in this particular case, to reveal something that may be very personal to them, that they may not be ready to touch yet. And so like I acknowledge that, like, even as I ask the question. And so we talk about somatic body practices and so forth. And like, I feel it in my chest. I feel it in my heart when I ask that question.
Yeah, thank you. I too feel it in the upper region of my chest. Like, and then when I take a question like that, I think to myself, how do I want to respond? So my patterns in the past were to respond in the way that Danielle will like me. How can I say the thing so everybody else likes me? How can I say the thing so I don't risk belonging? Yeah. And I think what has changed for me is, how do I belong to myself first? Right? So it's almost like curiosity with yourself has to include a compassion practice. And then I get compassionate with myself, going like, oh, of course, the first thing I'd want to do is please Danielle. And Danielle and I have a long existing relationship, so I don't have to worry about pleasing Danielle, because we can be with difference. We can explore disagreement, and we can agree to disagree after conversation. Yeah. So we're okay here. So now what do I want to say? And then I have to check in with myself. Because now that I'm no longer driven by my acceptance from you, what do I feel like I want to say? And it might not be my deepest, darkest secret, because I don't want to go there today. Yep. But it could be a week from now, because I'm ready and resourced to do that. And so there's a bit of trust. Like, I ask a question and I trust you'll take care of yourself.
Yeah. I'm appreciating for sure the honesty, the vulnerability in that response. But also what I'm noticing, and this is my coach brain stepping in, is that you just gave us a peek behind the curtain moment of what it looks like to slow down. So I asked you a question around, how do we cultivate curiosity when it might be rooted in trauma and discomfort? And you paused and you said, how do you feel as you asked that question? Right. And so like, what I'm noticing about that is it sort of redirects back to me, which I think is a wonderful practice, because sometimes people say things to us that you're like, did you think before you open your mouth at all? But to get them into a place where they can potentially see the impact of their words and the thing that they're asking of you in that moment is going to land differently. And they may not have been able to see it before, because they're coming with hey, I have an agenda. I want to know this. And I want to know it now.
Okay, I'll just tell another story.
I expect you to.
I went to a friend's house for Thanksgiving dinner, Indigenous days, just a time to revel in family. And I got to be with her biological family. And this is a friend that I've actually never met her biological family because she was adopted. And she and I have been friends for decades. I'm not going to say how many, but many, many decades. And so I'd never met this man before. We're having a nice conversation. It's a very warm dinner. We're at the end of our dinner. We're having dessert. And he looks at me and he says, "Where are you from?" I grew up in the same town. She and I went to school together. And I'm like, what are you really asking me? Which is a way of slowing down the conversation.
Yeah.
Because previously it would have been, I would have said the thing. Oh, I'm from Buffalo, New York. Of course I'm from Buffalo, New York. We're in Buffalo, New York. But that's not what he was asking me. But he also was not he was really curious about my ancestry. He said, "Where are you from?" And I said, "What are you really asking me? Are you asking me about my ancestry?" And then he began to share a story about how he grew up in a public school in Buffalo, New York, and how diverse it was. And he shared a little bit more as a white man. He shared a little bit more about how sad he was that his community was not as diverse as the one he grew up in. And then he also shared about how much he missed that. And so I shared a little bit about my ancestry. And then he shared about his travel and how much he loved to travel. And he's probably well into his late 70s. And as I was leaving, he looked at me from across the long table and he says, "I just want you to know you have absolutely made my day."
I love that. That's such a great example of around like how curiosity can take us to maybe unexpected places. For many people, particularly those with racialized identities, like in this country, the question of where are you from can be triggering, right? Because in many cases, it is used as an othering to say you're not from here. Clearly, you must be an immigrant. But I think what you did is you sort of turned it on its tail to just simply say like, well, tell me a little bit more about what you mean. And like, as the story continues, there, again, like I'm thinking about that egg slice. There's so much more than meets the eye at first question, if you will, that was asked in that moment, right? Like there was an underlying thing that the person was trying to get at, but it's not necessarily even what we as the end listener receive. It may just be, perhaps it wasn't worded as thoughtfully as it could be. And perhaps it was, right? Like that was this question. And so I love that, because I wonder how many times, even in my own life, do I jump to the response that I think, to your point, like the person is wanting to hear, and or is the response that I'm feeling because I may be triggered by something, as opposed to asking this bigger question of tell me more about your question. What a good practice. What a good practice. So Wendy, let me, as we get ready to wrap up here, I want to ask you, I guess, two final questions. And the first is, if you were engaging with someone who says to you, like, I'd love to be curious, I'd love to get to know people who are not like me, overall, not in my normal network and community, but I'm scared. What would you say to them, like, as a first step to get started?
Join me in my offerings of People Need People online. I share that because People Need People is really about warm data, which is the creation of Nora Bateson. But often what happens is people are just in breakouts. It's a lightly facilitated, and people are really, it's a story weaving experience. And I often say it moves from like life stories to stories alive in me. So if you asked me, Wendy, in the beginning, you asked me, Wendy, introduce yourself. And I was like, well, here is what I've rehearsed about myself. These are the things that maybe the culture expects of me, or the way people introduce themselves. But maybe it's not really about me. It's about the way that I've been taught about how to talk about me. And these opportunities, and People Need People is online, is really an opportunity. It feels a little bit like we share a series of stories as we've done through our conversation, which is like water seeping into the dry earth. It fills the cracks slowly. Something familiar in my story might simulate something in your story, and it kind of softens the soil around the story of mine. Sometimes I forget. I might forget. I don't want to talk about the story. You talked about trauma and discomfort. I don't want to talk about my story. Or maybe I just pretend it never happened. So I might do it on purpose. And it doesn't really matter, regardless of the reason. I'm ready to share a little bit more about myself. Yeah. Because it doesn't feel so hard and crusty. And so if we want to get curious, you got to be in the practice. And often it's easier to practice with strangers. Because I hear their stories, it stimulates something in me. And basically I am changing and working what is stuck and rigid in myself about what I have lived and what I have experienced. Yeah.
So it's partially about finding ourselves in places where we can, in fact, have community, where we can listen to other people. But I think the other thing about the practice is that we need to be able to at least, one, suspend judgment in that moment. And if we can't suspend it, at least attend to why we are judging a particular thing that was said, experienced by this other person. Like what's alive in us as a result of what we've heard.
We can't read our ways out of not judging people. We can't gather more books. We can't get new skills. We have to get out there and practice.
Yeah. Yeah. I know personally, and like that was one of the reasons I wanted to even start this podcast. My life is richer because of the new people that have entered it. Especially when they are vastly different from me. We do not see the world the same. We do not have the same lived experiences, childhood memories, etc. And every time I get to sit and like really talk to people and ask them what's important about something related to their world, like I feel like I walk away more fulfilled and whole than I entered the conversation. And to me, that's a gift.
Can I ask you a question?
You most certainly can.
Do you remember the day we met?
I do.
And I'm curious about what was your perspective about meeting in that Whole Foods on that day?
Yeah, I think, gosh, and just to like remember, it's been some time since we met, but I just remember encountering you and thinking, wow, she's intense. But, and I think like, again, like as I had that first recollection of sort of like, this was the experience I had of meeting you in that moment. It was never about you. I think though it spoke to something that was alive in me at that time. And it was like, I'm still a fairly young professional. I'm trying to find my ways. Do I have the right language to approach this particular conversation? And so I experienced that as this person is intense. Now, having known you now for several years, I'm like, you have your moments of intensity, but often I just find you quite enjoyable to just sit and chat with. But what showed up for me that day wasn't about you. It was completely about me.
I remember that day you were sitting across the table. We were sitting in the Whole Foods. It was before COVID.
Yeah.
I was learning about you. What have you been doing? Where are you working? What kind of work are you exploring? And we just kind of danced around a lot of different subjects. So I kind of walked away with like, okay, there's a lot here that can be explored more together. It's not just a single point. And I'm grateful for that opportunity.
Yeah.
And it's a reminder of like, we say yes to when people want to meet us, and we stay curious, even though we don't even know them.
Yeah. And I love that you told that story, because I do remember us bouncing around to lots of different topics. And I kind of left that meeting like, I don't even know what we're supposed to do at the conclusion. Because we touched on so many things, right? There were no clear next steps. But what did feel clear, if anything, from that moment is we needed to stay in conversation. We did not necessarily have a destination. And I'm so glad that we were allowed to have that space and time to just be in conversation continually over the years, because I'm like, look at all the beautiful things that have emerged from that. We co-created a course through reimagining racial equity. We have become good friends. I come to you for counsel at times, and I know vice versa. And I see something really beautiful. And so when I think about what started out as potentially like a professional networking opportunity, right? We were introduced through some other colleagues, I think has blossomed into a friendship. And like that, again, is what I mean when I say curiosity, meeting people who are maybe coming from different backgrounds from you can really be a blessing of its own, because what a gift. Like, I am so grateful to have you in my life, and thank you for 1,001 questions that were asked on that day.
It is a reminder of curiosity doesn't pay back right away.
Yeah.
But we have to stay curious, right? And the system, the way it works is we like want an immediate feedback loop. Was this good for me? Was this fun for me? Did I get something out of it? What is going to be my future? And what happens when we release all of that? And we just stay curious, stay in wonder, and have the experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that is a lovely way to wrap up our call today. But I will ask you my final question. I'd love for you to, you mentioned the warm data. How can people get in touch with you if they're interested in getting involved in your work?
Go to www.consciouscollaboratory.com and have a look around the site, and certainly sign up for Warm Data Labs, which you'll see under the resources section, and go in there and sign up for our Warm Data Labs. We have one in January, February, and March of 2025, and people from around the world join us on Zoom. You don't need to prepare at all. You can invite your friends and family. You can invite your children, like as young as, 9, 10, or 11, to participate in these conversations that can be really rich and broad for a mutual learning experience.
Yeah. So I love that idea, and I will be joining you in a Warm Data Lab soon, because what a rich opportunity to, again, connect with other people, to be able to hear their stories. And we all have a story. And I'm looking forward to like learning more about different people and myself in the process. So thank you so much, Wendy.
I can't wait to see you there. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Unpack Culture Chronicles. I hope Wendy's stories and insights sparked your own curiosity and inspired you to explore deeper connections in your relationships and work. And remember, building bridges starts with curiosity. Until next time, be well.